Hi guys, this review's on the March 1 to 10 by 24 illuminated second focal plane scope. The screenshot you're looking at is from the swfa.com website. SWFA is one of the handful of dealers that the scope can be purchased from. It's a compact scope with a length just over 10 inches and a weight just about 1.25 pounds. Most of the specs are pretty standard. There's a few, however, that do really stand out. First being the magnification range. The engineers of the March brand are famous for their 10-time magnification range. What that means is that you'll notice that the minimum magnification is 1x and the maximum magnification is 10 times higher than that. Most scopes will have a significantly lower magnification ratio. For example, a 3x9 has a 3 times magnification ratio. The 9 times magnification is 3 times higher than the lower number. Or a 4 to 12 also has a 3 times magnifier. A 5 to 25 has a 5 times magnifier. Or a 6 to 24 has a 4 times magnifier. What March has been able to pull off with a 10 times magnification range is pretty impressive. Another spec that really stands out to me is the 200 MOA of elevation and windage adjustment allowed by the turrets. This is enough adjustment to reach out to any distance that you're going to want to shoot. Probably the most important spec on this page is the focal distance. If you watched my introduction video, you know that to me a 10-yard minimum focus distance is the absolute minimum that I will accept, and the March scope says that it's got it. So measuring the minimum focus range is a pretty simple matter. What I've done is I've taken some eye charts and I've taped them to a cardboard box and I've put that box on a stool. I've got a tape measure sitting underneath my chair. I'm measuring the minimum parallax or the minimum focus distance from my head, not from the end of the scope. And the tape measure is just extended out into my yard, and I move the box in until I can no longer focus in on the image. Now, I've made a turret tape for the scope so you can kind of see what the exact ranging ability of it is. It will range down to 6 feet. 2 yards. That's not a joke. It is crazy how close at 10x this gun will actually parallax-free focus down to. Here's some video to show you what I'm talking about. It starts out with the scope zoomed all the way down to 1x just to give you an idea of how close the actual eye chart is. And then I zoom in the image up to its max 10x, and you can see how still in focus the image stays. What this means is that you can actually use your focus knob as a ranging device. All the way up to around 20, 21 feet, you can measure to the nearest foot how far away their target is. From there to the nearest yard, you can go all the way up to probably around, I'd say another to 20-yard mark. And then you'll notice on the parallax wheel, it really gets spaced far apart. So as you can see here, it goes from 11 yards, 13 yards, 17 yards, 21, then it jumps to 38 and then 100 in a really short distance. So it's really good for telling you how far away things are that are at close ranges that maybe your laser rangefinder wouldn't be able to determine. But once you get out past, I'd say 25 yards, really, a laser rangefinder is required. All right, this next section is on optical clarity, and to be frank, the images you see are not a representation of what you see when you look through the March scope. The images you see are going to be a representation of what the Tacticam sees after they've gone through the prisms for the film through scope eyepiece plus the crappy lenses that the Tacticam has. The Tacticam kind of changes colors of the image. It lightens some things, it darkens other things. Unfortunately, you'll probably look at this and go, hey, my $300 scope has images that clear. And you're right, they do. That's because these are images of the Tacticam, not as what it looks. It's not exactly what it looks like in the March. The March is worlds better, and I'll do my best to explain that. But you know, an image is worth 1,000 words, and I can't give you that image. I'm sorry. So while I show you some images taken under some separate lighting conditions through the March 1x10, I will say this. The glass in the 1:10 is darn near perfect. 10x magnification isn't really all that much, and it is easier for scopes the low magnification range to maintain a clear picture, and that's just because the light doesn't need to bend as much. The scope does suffer from a very narrow depth of field of view. When you get it focused in on an object, things immediately in front of it and behind the image are often slightly blurry and out of focus. This is really nice if you're ranging and you want to know exactly how far away something is so that you can adjust the parallax and figure that out. But for most hunting situations, it is a drawback. In this part of the video, I'm going to adjust the zoom range from 10x all the way back down to 1x. And what I want you to pay close attention to is the edges of the image. You'll notice that there's absolutely no distortion in the image towards the edges, which is often not the case. And when you get all the way down, you'll notice that there's no tunneling whatsoever. So you get a full sight picture all the way across your 10x zoom range. So here the scope's looking at a 25 meter bench rest target that is fittingly 25 meters away. Obviously you can't see in the video here that the bullseye is clear. You can see the 9, 8 rings just clear as day. They're washed out in the video. One of the things I want to point out is the reticle, how around that aiming dot there's a larger ring that is really handy for target shooting. It just kind of allows you to frame a lot of the round targets that you see. Now that I've mentioned the reticle, it might be a good time to bring up that the reticle is illuminated in this scope. The illumination has 4 settings. They're all red, and none of them are daylight bright, which I know is a big deal for a lot of you guys. So even though this is done in the daytime on a white colored wall, as I go through the 4 different settings, realize that when it's really bright outside, that the illumination gets washed out, and that your best bet is to stick with the black version of the reticle because it'll give you the most contrast with your background. As I mentioned in the intro video, I've purchased a lot of other top tier scopes to compare with my March brand, and the one that compares the most favorably to this 1:10 is the Night Force NXS 2.5 to 10 by 42 millimeter. Basically, what really killed the Night Force for me was that it only has a 25 yard minimum parallax. It's just something that I couldn't get over for airgun shooting. The Night Force did have an advantage in low light situations. It's got a 42 millimeter Bell objective on the end of it, and you could use it as the light was going down for a significant amount of time longer than the small 24 millimeter objective Bell on the March scope. This wasn't necessarily a pro or a con of the Night Force versus the March, but the color representation I didn't think was very good. It sounds like it's a negative, but it also gave the Night Force image a little bit more of that pop that a lot of people talk about when they look through a tier 1 scope. The red looked a little bit too red to my eye. There's a faint purple door that one of my neighbors has that the color was off, yet whatever coatings Night Force uses on their lenses, is significantly different than the March scopes. The March scopes, I would say, have more of a true to life look to them, whereas the Night Force lenses, whatever coatings they use, gave it an almost photoshopped look. And for a lot of people, I think they might actually like the look of the lens through the Night Force. I personally preferred the March. One last difference of note was that on the Night Force, in the low magnification ranges, there was a little bit of tunneling. It wasn't a deal breaker for me by any means, because I seldom use the lower magnification range. But if that's something that would bother you, that's something that you might want to consider. All right, to summarize my opinion of the March 1 to 10, it's an amazing hunting scope. If you put this on a gun that's used to shoot animals, you will not be disappointed. If you shoot things like deer, you can take out deer, elk, anything up to hundreds of yards with this. As long as your target is big enough, this optic is suitable. At only 10 times magnification for air gunners, shooting anything out at range becomes more of a challenge. So if you're shooting something like a bird or a rabbit out to 100 yards, 10 times magnification does become a limitation. It's really suitable for near range stuff like rats right up to you, birds, rabbits on and out to 50 yards. This is an almost perfect optic because the low magnification range gives you a really wide field of view. The optics are just crystal clear and perfect. Dialing the turrets is a no-brainer on easiness. Just, it's a fabulous all-around scope. Comparing other top brand scopes, one of the limitations is that the front objective bell here is small, so it does suffer a bit at late night use and around dusk. The illuminated reticle is outstanding. There's no bleeding, no blurriness at all. It is only daylight bright. It is only nighttime bright. You wouldn't use it in the daylight, which isn't really a problem. The reticle is so nice on this. Using the black in the daytime is going to be probably what you'd want to use. And then if the conditions, like a forest or something, are dark a little bit, you've got options to make the reticle pop a little bit that wouldn't normally be there. Overall, this is a really good scope. Again, for hunting, it's personally my least favorite of the four I own, and that's just because most of the shooting I do is actually target shooting. And so this tends to live on guns that I shoot offhand on near distances, like my Edgun Leshy or on my 177 Taipan Veteran when I'm shooting indoors. It really excels at the near range stuff.